Hey friends, it's Drayton. Welcome. Today I am at the Georgia State Railroad Museum. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic happening, all the train cars are closed down and there's not a whole lot you can do or see here, but there's some things. So I'll show you around and we'll check out some model trains, some big locomotives, and just see what the train world has to offer today. Gonna take a tour in a little bit. We're gonna poke around until the tour starts. But one thing that I think about when I think of trains, especially these old trains, is hobos. I always picture those people carrying around a knapsack on a stick. Check this out. They had their own way of communicating with each other, although I can't get in there to show you up close. It's pretty cool to see a little history of the hobo. I do not like all these signs because I like to do exactly opposite. I like to climb on these and just check them out and see what it was like to get in these. I've always been fascinated with trains. I had a train set as a kid, so I had this fascination with trains. I always thought it was so cool, and now I'm right up close. Look how big this thing is. Holy cow, these wheels are almost as big as me. They're huge. Well, this one looks like you can climb on. It's not shut down, so let's see. Cool. This is the train car we were just in, the engine. Look how big this motor is. Wow. Had to have been hot in there. Pretty soon they're going to change the locomotive that is in that position and switch it. This is a switching station, as you can see here. And they do this a couple times a day, I guess. So I'll show you that. But in the meantime, check out this interesting car. This was built in 1925 as a segregated coach. And although you can't get in to see, I'm trying to show you through some of the windows. It's hard to imagine that not that long ago that segregated trains and anything segregated even existed in this world. But here it is. A little somber piece of history here. I'm gonna check out this one. Another, looks like a sleeper car. Oh, you kind of see down the hallway. Okay. I've been on a few trains. One of my recent videos is from the Sunrail in Orlando, but I've never been on a sleeper car train. I've never traveled by train or anything more than like subway rides or the one in Orlando. So checking out these old sleeper cars is really cool. I wish we could get in them though and see what it's like. I've always liked little small places like that. I hear some noise out here. Like maybe the engine's moving. Let's see. Cool. One of my model train cars looked just like this one here. In fact, they look like a couple of these. I'm gonna hang out here in the shade until this locomotive moves. I wanna see how the switching works and show you. But I'm pretty hot right here. It's the beginning of August. It's pretty warm. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like around all this heat and diesel and coal or whatever they ran all these engines off of back in the day. How hot and dirty and miserable it could have been. Maybe it was really awesome, I don't know. But I can't imagine it being really awesome to be in this environment all the time.
in 1833. They start construction on this site in 1851 and complete it by 1855. Now this roundhouse that is here is actually an expansion that was added to that 1855 roundhouse in about 1927. So that's why it looks a little bit newer. It has this poured concrete, it looks different than it would have looked had this been built in the 1850s. Now we have two engines here, guys. This locomotive here, the 223, is very typical of what you would have seen inside this roundhouse at the peak of activity here at the site, which is probably about 1920. This locomotive was built in 1907 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works. You can see we pulled it into the roundhouse, guys. Many people, when they come here, they assume that this is in here backwards. It is not. When you're looking at the smokestack, there's a smoke jack right here. So if we didn't have this little display here in the way, this locomotive will be pulled up underneath that smoke jack so that smoke will go out the top of the roundhouse. If you look at the floor, guys, you will notice that this is also a wood block floor in here. This is pretty common for a lot of industrial sites in the 19th and early 20th centuries. But the wood blocks that are here, some of them are restored and some of them are not. So you can kind of tell the older ones, they've absorbed a lot of oil and water, and you can't even see the wood grain in them anymore. The floor that's back here has been restored, and we have to restore it a lot. The older blocks are soaked in creosote, but it's an older creosote that's very toxic. I mean, it makes the blocks last a long time, but it's not good. We can't use it today. Now remember, we talked about the site opening in 1855. At that point, we're using exclusively steam locomotives. The Central of Georgia starts to purchase diesel electric locomotives in 1939. The first one they purchased is this one on the other side of the 223 here, this little switch engine. Now this locomotive, this 2715, is the newest locomotive that we have on site, built in the 1960s. It's a GP35. And you can see that Savannah, Atlanta is painted along the side. This is the last locomotive that was purchased under the Central of Georgia's name, because by the 1960s, the Central of Georgia is on the way out. Rail car ride is the oldest car, it's the oldest piece that we have on site, built in 1878. And this is an all wood passenger car. A lot of times you'll see cars like this that have the wood paneling, but it has steel framing behind it. This does not have steel framing, even though it does have some steel around it to kind of help keep it together and keep it from moving as much. This also has the 19th century trucks here. You can see that it says Central of Georgia down here, right above this journal box, and it looks like this is metal, but this is actually made of wood. There's wood here, and there's wood here in the center. So if you can imagine in the 19th century, a major issue that you might be looking out for is fire. If you see smoke coming out of here, that means that you didn't put enough oil in here, and then that could create a fire that potentially could catch this on fire, could catch your car on fire. That was a major problem for a lot of railroads, or railroading in general, in the 19th century. Hi guys, we're coming out into another building, even though this doesn't look like much of a building. This is our machine shop, and we've come out the side of the roundhouse into the machine shop. If you look right there, guys, you'll see that wall that's sort of cut right there. That is actually a curved wall. You can see it's slightly curved. That is part of the original 1855 roundhouse. You can see where they've added on the 1927 roundhouse expansion. This is a nice space to see a lot of changes that happened here. That used to be a freight elevator, that piece of wood that's right there. And then there is an archway that is bricked in. That was the entrance to a little foundry that was here. This building was in pretty bad shape by the time the Central of Georgia shuts this site down in 1963. When the Central was bought out by Southern Railway, it's in pretty bad shape. And then Hurricane David hits 1988, 89, and it just takes down what's left of this building. There is a movie called Glory, if you've seen that. That's about the 54th Massachusetts that was filmed here in 1989, and there were a lot of portions of this building still left when they filmed that. So if you're interested in to kind of see what that looked like, you can watch that movie. You'll also see on the wall, guys, all of these splotches that go down the wall. You can see the yellow splotches that are there. We'll see those in several places. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. This is our workers' garden, and this was built here about 1900. We have cleaned out this space. Even in 1900, they had a nice little fountain with a millstone in the center. So this was a place where they could come and they could eat their lunches. They could work inside the garden if they wanted to do that. Even though our garden is mostly decorative, we have lots of nice little plants here. This actually would have been full of fruits and vegetables for workers to work on and then take home to their families. But we did get a cut from the last lady who lived in that house, Mrs. Cooper. She gave us a cut from her rose bush, which was from the original garden here. So we do have the original roses, even though everything else is new. All right, guys, let's go into the shop. I'd like to remind people that our main claim to fame at Georgia State Railroad Museum is that we have the largest collection of antebellum railroad buildings in the United States. So when we're talking about that, we're talking mostly about the buildings back here. The first floor that we're standing in right now, this is an 1850 structure, as are the other buildings that we'll see as we start to walk this way around the site. And this engine, as you can see, was made in Charleston, South Carolina, so it's a regional piece for us. And it dates somewhere between 1858 and 1860. It's a stationary steam engine, even though you can move it if you want to. But this would be used to run one, maybe two machines. It's kind of a small engine. We're going to talk about this smokestack because we've talked about how the Central of Georgia closed this site in 1963. Everyone who worked here was laid off, and the Central of Georgia, having been absorbed by Southern Railway, doesn't really exist anymore. It's just a railroad on paper, but it doesn't exist as a railroad at that point. And Southern Railway still owns this site, but this is an 1850s, basically a steam site. It hasn't been updated for diesel maintenance, so they can't really do anything with anything here, even though they're still paying taxes on this property. So they start to try to figure out ways that they can make money off this property, and one way they can do that is to sell the 1850s Savannah gray brick. So they take down half that roundhouse and start to sell that brick, and then they start to take brick from other places on site. But 1833, the original charter said that if the Central of Georgia, or if this land ceased to be used by railroad, that the ownership of the land would revert back to the city of Savannah. So the city owns it, and that's why the site is still here today. All right, guys, we're going to go over to the blacksmith shop, and we'll see what Shay is making inside there. Here in this building, this is another 1850 structure, and it's our blacksmith shop. And the only thing that's really new about this is part of the walls that are up here, and then this roof is new. Historically, this would have had 12 or 13 blacksmiths working in here in brick forges. So all the way down the wall, those forges would go, and then the smoke from the forges and the smoke from the boiler room would have gone through underground tunnels that converged underneath this smokestack. So that's the purpose of the smokestack, to take the smoke from this building and from the boiler room out of the site. Now, the cistern that's there holds about 30,000 gallons of rainwater for showers and privies at the base of that smokestack, so that you could bathe before you went home at the end of the day. You could change clothes, because it would be pretty dirty after working here all day long, as you can imagine. Alright guys, really quickly we'll talk about this setup that we have right here. You can see that we're working on this right now, so I won't be able to turn this on so that you can hear it. But if you can imagine this line shaft, we have it set up on this nice gray scaffolding. It's very clean looking. But if you look at pictures of machine shops from the 19th and early 20th centuries, the belts are kind of going all different directions across the building, up and down, lots of different spaces. It would look very different than what the setup that we have here. You can see the brackets, those that are there. Those will be turned up and attached to the wall, where you can see that yellow. That yellow is a sulfur compound that kind of helps the brackets adhere to the wall, but it also cushions the wall against the movement of this line shaft. So it'll go all the way down the wall here, out that little opening, which is now covered by wood, go into the machine shop. It would split and go down both walls of the machine shop. And the line shaft also would go out the other side of the boiler room. So our engine is here that's going to operate our line shaft. That's going to go out the other side, onto the other side of the site where the carpentry shop is. So that one steam engine is going to operate every single machine on this site. About 1900, guys, we start to see the line shaft being cut down. So by 1920, they have started to use electric power here, and they're not using a line shaft like the one that you see here.
When I was a kid, I lived right across the street from a railroad track, and probably about 100 yards, maybe a little bit more. And I remember as a kid watching cabooses on the back of trains. And I also remember when they stopped using cabooses, and it was a big deal. There was a date, I don't remember what it was, but it was advertised that cabooses won't be on trains anymore. So my family and I went out that day and tried to catch a sight of one of the last cabooses. I remember that. It was cool. I remember I said I had a model train set as a kid. It was on a 4x8 sheet of plywood in our basement. This is much bigger, and apparently it's all in operation, but the same style of trains that I had. I don't remember what you call them, but there's a couple different sizes. I had the common middle size. Well, apparently there was a major derail on the model train set yesterday, so it's not in operation today. Well, the Georgia State Railroad Museum is pretty cool. I'm here in the gift shop, and I ran across these postcards here. I'm going to pick a couple up for you. If you are a patron, you subscribe to me on Patreon, and you give $5 a month or more, I will send you a postcard from one of my journeys every month, starting this month. So go over to Patreon. There's a link right below. If you want to sign up for $1 a month, that's cool. You'll get access to some very special patron-only videos. And like I said, $5 or more a month, I'm sending you a postcard. So one of these could be yours. Which one do you want? There's some pretty good ones here. Ooh, recipe for pecan pie? Is it pecan or pecan? I say pecan. I'm getting this for somebody. Well, I'm going to get these postcards.
Okay, 4.
Yep. Something I used to do as a kid is try to get them to honk their horn. I don't know if they'll do it. Maybe you won't do it. It still works. I used to stand out in the parking lot right in front of the railroad tracks across the street from my house. I used to ride my bike there, and you could just do that, honk your horn motion, and nearly every time, maybe because we were kids, those engineers would honk that train horn. It was really cool. I laughed just like I did just now. Well, thanks for joining me today, friends. If you like what you see here, hit like, hit subscribe, and hit that notification button that looks like a bell, so you don't miss out on any of these adventures ever again. I'll see you in the next video.